Thank you, Ceann Taoiseach. As you know, you did establish a special cabinet committee on mortgage arrears. We had the Keane report, and we've had much soul-searching in relation to providing answers for the 118,000 people who are in mortgage arrears in this country and who have significant arrears of over 90 days. And yesterday there was a rushed press conference, which I thought the Irish Examiner's headline summed it up very well, describing it as a newsless news conference. Or another columnist described it when she wrote that it was a very moving waste of time. And in many ways, Taoiseach, it sums up the approach of the government, which is really more about spin and more about substance. But it's a very serious issue that affects people in arrears. And what wasn't announced yesterday, Taoiseach, and what didn't merit a press release from this government or a press conference, was something that Minister Joan Burton did last week in commencing a statutory instrument and laying it before the House, buried in Irish Ifigul, which essentially begins the phasing out and the cutting of mortgage interest supplement, which was a scheme, probably the most practical scheme available, to help low-income families to avail of support from the state in order to keep the banker at bay and to keep their houses. Now, where is the social solidarity, Taoiseach? In a week when the broken promise of burning the bondholders gets its final burial, when $1 billion will be paid over by the Taoiseach, where is the social solidarity? And how can the Labour Party stand over phasing out the ending of a scheme, the mortgage interest supplement scheme, which has been of benefit to 19,000 families, and we all know that that figure has jumped significantly in the last 2 years and is likely to jump again. So low-income families who could avail of this scheme will not now be in a position to avail of it. They'll have to do a deal with the banker first. They'll have to pay that deal for the next 12 months before they'll even be considered for the mortgage interest supplement scheme. And Taoiseach, you briefed the banks yesterday. You wouldn't brief this House on the details of the bill. You wouldn't brief the public.
Thank you, Deputy.
So the question I want to ask you, Taoiseach, we put down a notice asking for this statutory instrument to be annulled. And I would ask you, will you agree, Taoiseach, to annul this supplement, which is basically making it much more difficult now into the future for low-income families to apply for mortgage interest supplement relief?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
I'm not interested in the speculation that you refer to. The newspapers are entitled to write the reports as they see fit. That's their business. The situation is that the Economic Management Council met with the banks yesterday evening and had the banks meet with them. There wasn't any further detail given to the banks at that meeting, other than no more than what was given when we announced the fact that the government had approved the personal insolvency legislation. And unlike meetings that were held in government buildings in the past, there will be a record of this one for posterity when they've got a full written account of it. And in that regard, Deputy Martin, I want you to understand that the mortgage arrears, arrears subcommittee met 6 times in the last 6 to 8 weeks in regard to pushing this thing through to a conclusion where the legislation will now be published and the details given on Friday. And I want to make it perfectly clear, as I said yesterday, this is not about people who can't pay. It's about people who won't pay. And we don't actually have to wait, Deputy Martin, for the implementation of the legislation for the lenders in this case to be able to sit down with their customers and their borrowers and work out solutions. And in fact, if the response of the banks to the Keane report and the options and facilities that are going to be made available by banks are actually pushed through, the requirement for use of the legislation of personal insolvency will be greatly diminished. In respect of the statutory instrument that you mentioned, this arises from persons entering into the mortgage arrears process within the Keane report, and it's for that reason that the Minister initiated the statutory instrument, and that will proceed.
Thank you.
Your last comment, I'm not asking Minister Burton, you seem to be completely on it. So it's not about the Keane report. It stems from the Social Welfare Act, and it's commencing an order emanating from social welfare. You don't seem to be aware. You don't seem to be aware of that, Taoiseach.
Deputy,
You had a big press conference yesterday, and all the lights in camera there. It's called Action Plan for Mortgage Arrears, and you seem to be blissfully unaware about a very significant measure that your Minister for Social Welfare took, which basically restricts low-income families from accessing the mortgage interest supplement relief, which is a very practical step. Don't be getting shorty about it, because you know it hurts. These people know it hurts. These people over here know it hurts. Because the government, and particularly the Labour arm of the government, promised that there would be social solidarity. And I asked a very basic question. I asked a very basic question of the Taoiseach. Will he repeal? I think it's a wrong decision, Taoiseach. I think the statutory instrument is a wrong decision. I think it should be repealed.
Please, thank you.
Well, it's very difficult with the kind of heckling that's going on. I think now, in fairness to counsel, I'm doing my best to put the question.
Not a statement, please. A question.
I'm entitled to.
You're not entitled to make a statement. You're entitled to ask a supplementary question for 1 minute.
I asked a basic question, Taoiseach. A very basic question. If
you mind your own business, please.
There are likely to be thousands of people who are going to get into mortgage arrears in the coming weeks and in the coming months. Essentially, a very practical scheme has been cut and has been phased out.
Would you please put your supplementary
That is the impact
question
of the statutory instrument. I asked you simply, Taoiseach, will you repeal that statutory instrument?
Thank you.
There was no press conferences about it and so on. You should do it. It's the honourable thing to do. It's the right thing to do by low-income families who are going to bear the brunt of this decision. Not banks, not anybody else, but the low-income families who will get it today.
Thank you.
And months.
It's the banks who get this money, Deputy Martin. This year it will cost about 50 million. This recommendation was made as part of the Keane report, and it's an incentive for banks to sit down with their borrowers to work out solutions where people are getting into mortgage arrears. There is no intention of repealing the statutory instrument. The banks under this system, for those in this category, the banks will be in receipt of 50 million of taxpayers' money.
Deputy Adams, thank you. Deputy Adams, please. Deputy Adams, please.